I was lucky. I'm just reading chapter Chitraketu meets the supreme personality of Godhead now in the sixth canto, and in one of those purports, Srila Prabhupada says that Angira Muni didn't try to instruct Chitraketu before when he wanted to have a kid, but after his son died, then Narada Muni showed up. He was like, now you're ready for spiritual knowledge. And Prabhupada explains, until a person arrives at a certain dissatisfaction with the material world, they cannot be instructed. And he says, this is why the Krishna consciousness movement is flourishing in the Western countries, because they are they're actually on the platform of detachment. So what I'm thinking is that Krishna consciousness is already getting the people that are like disappointed and disillusioned with the world. Okay.
Yes, you're saying?
Well, I was saying we can do Dandava Pranams like before the recording, or we can just do it now.
Yes, please. This is something that I've been trying to culture and bring into this whole experience. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Vansha kalpa tarubhyascha Krishna sindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you for that. That kind of eased me into this chair. It was a whole panic, like I was saying, with this whole techie stuff. Today I have the pleasure of hearing from Dhanaraj Prabhu. If you could kindly introduce yourself. I know amongst many other things you're a writer, a poet, and a devotee. And recently I saw that you're doing journaling workshops, writing workshops. Yeah. So if you could kindly introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Dhanaraj. I live in the United States. I like to move around, and anything that has to do with writing I'm interested in. I really like the tradition that we find ourselves in. Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, how they write and what they write about seems to me like the pinnacle of writing. And recently I've gotten into rock climbing, and I like to read a lot. I don't make as much time for it as I'd like, but the idea of a book as like a mountain or a challenge seems really interesting to me, like conquering a book or like going through it.
Yeah. I was excited with what you shared, this poem that we're about to hear you read. And at first when I just I don't want to say even speed reading, I just glanced over it. I was just squealing with excitement, Oh, it looks so cool, and there's some cool things that are being said here, And then I was like, wait, let me put on some alpha waves or something and just sink into this poem. It looks like it's something that's gonna smack my brain and get me into trying to figure out what it is. And indeed, it got me into that. So I was thinking maybe we could start with a read. In fact, let me do this. Let me share the screen so everybody else can see what it is I was squealing about.
And could we also pause the music in the meantime?
Yes, definitely. Right at the end of it.
Nice.
There we go. So where are you right now, Prabhu, in America?
Right now I'm in Los Angeles.
LA. Seems like LA is the melting pot for all creatives and Krishna consciousness at the moment.
Interesting.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, the grass is always greener. Like I look at Alachua in the East Coast, like New York and Alachua, as like, okay, that's where creative are.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen quite a bit of activity that side as well.
Yeah.
So I have the poem here. I'll just share it to our screen.
Okay.
Mhm.
But before I read,
Mhm.
I want to thank you for the breakdown and the questions that you asked. I graduated college where I studied creative writing 6 years ago, and I think it's been that long since I've heard this kind of questioning. Like the questions that you asked, like I could tell that you really read it and engaged with the piece. And it wasn't since I was in a class where other people were editing work and really deeply reading that anyone's engaged in work. And yeah, it's nice. I think that like people that work in jobs and get performance reviews, they have people look at their lives in such a way, or like if you're in a relationship, you probably have your partner like deep dive into your personality in the same way. But like any time that somebody really spends time with something that we do, or like aspects of our personality, it it really helps you feel seen, and it kind of creates this feedback loop of like it creates like a powerful reflection or mirror into who we are when somebody looks at us that way. So I appreciate that, beyond appreciating that you are like on top of appreciating that you invited me to talk about poetry. And when I saw what kinds of questions you wrote, I was like, man, I should be hanging out with Atmatatu Prabhu more, because like this is the kind of dialogue that's like really fun. And yeah, just like everyone has their own nature, like to get to talk about writing in like a technical way, it's just like really fun. People geek out about mechanics, but there's like a mechanic to writing, and I
True.
just, yeah, I realize like how much you really dig it. So thanks a lot for that.
No, thank you. Actually, this took me back to a rebellious point in time in my own educational career. You could say I remember when we were studying linguistics and poetry, English actually, and I used to fight against structure and approaching writing in this way, asking these questions. Who am I to say this poet is going through this and you use that?
Right.
But then recently, I realized that yeah, actually, it's kind of cool. It's very important actually to go through written work like this. Like anyway, we'll get to that because this is an amazing piece of writing. I was just looking at this. Yeah, if you may.
Okay. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga. Dashing to you sincerely, I wrote for my friends and family about this February. The studio apartment, storing things in place, caved to fearful wishes for a locked door so they'd keep in place while I starved the vestigial parts of this body, cornering something elemental in the room. How awful! The face of grotesque freedom I cannot handle. To be taken as seriously as I demanded and catch wind that that's what I'm capable of? When in the garb of anonymity privacy affords, caught glimpses, I plunge through dimensional portals to dislodge the false ego's rules. For 60 dawn and dusks did improv on Omegle, Snap, and chat rooms for particular penchants, sexual, experiential, or in general, until I got confused, farting through pajamas, playing Skyrim to become a god via simple electrical manipulation. With so much red tape between it, there was even a pattern to the smoke and mirrors. Full of crusty boogers rimming my nose, I gave up wondering if this art good. Embarrassed for all the prana misused, it seemed the entire song happened at once, for the record, though at single points along a spiral at the needle's end. Asking strangers, refer to me by what my inertia calls itself, like Sal Greenshield, Tyler, Quinn, I look at your shoes, etc. Just because a runaway cumulonimbus cloud was kept in from nature to tumble grayness alone without flowers. In a mirror, I yell to scare myself out of it, yet maybe father, hurt, no, where I heal in reverse. Yes, ma, please, remember my form as the front door opens to April and the hand of his divine grace turns the knob. There is already such giddiness within me. A single thank you is worth all the breath and time pushed from my open mouth as a voice to emerge freely into the hallway with lungs in place of wings. I'm wound into a dual compound, behaving like poems, attracted to the summer ground so much I fall. Hooray! On grass, full of hope, a hare hops best by bits, slanting my hips tortistically, rhyming with Krishna in a sentence. I feel his brightness the more how you say branch in Spanish rises to drown my tongue in gentleness. The taste of the world's surface sours to cotton candy I soak past, practicing openness to everything, somewhat cautiously now on the page first, with ears poised counter-parenthetically. Against a tree, I am the splash of hearing a game of telephone, or parrots drunk on mango juice, dripping syllables to word, a symbol into completion, my fluidity buried. Sinking is still possible, as the soul I am is simply naked, skinny, dipping an ocean, where my teachers verb as doves and dive enjambments to serve deeper meaning, colored by freshness they've plumbed, swimming to the noun, cloistering itself. In a brilliant dream, I follow jubilantly how adjectives mirror something swelling the vault of language. Caesura guards with a silence, as meanings shuffle around a period. Within an ocean of mercy, you leapt over to find us, keeping an oath parallel to the ancient one, Lucian, pure, rocked by white waves, blue eyes saw beside the friend who sunk in fiery fun for the touchstone kids gifted, roaring lion like to clasp the sun's hand at the helm, beneath starry stars with and in love, wandering occasionally, slipping, enduring hope to be remembered in your catching me, full of trust, hugging the priceless tuning fork where Tulsi rose bushes bloom everywhere and anywhere, dazzled by the alleyway's chalk pastel that forever dressing in knee ties, uproariously funny my summit of surrender and brotherhood can shine, simultaneously included in a sidelong glance, steady-minded lovers see everything in. With my personality wholly offered at their great hill, amidst the forest reaches of those original growth songs, beg to sing again. I, Diogo Nicolas Segovia Vargas Peña Daza Danaraja de Fernandez Alcázar rings in sound to jumble the question, do I age? Nava. Vi God anda as pa afar, El Nino close, G is jazz, and is as rod, around, answered back in verse, spiraling windwards to join this concert with others, desiring simply to function in joy. I bow down willingly, uplifted into the blossoming world's music where your self-evident beauty is revealed, as gradual sunrise that will resemble our cowboy's play in October's full moonlight, fully capable of nom-nomming at the darkness inside, beneath cloud bursts newly formed, dressed in sudden lightning, besting the sun, broken tongues are aligned to buzz, learning from bumblebees made pupils by their own longing and attraction to the cool blue flames hug. Ugh, I mean, yeah, so goofy how a bookmark quoting Borges 19 years ago may have started this. Surrounding consciousness with books, seeking rest but awake all night, transcribing the sun flowering is the only thing that happens. Instead, watch the aspirations for wealth in Sanskrit hover away to help me serve the king of charity. Ha, get the joke? It is a dangerous business, going in search for the magnolia that asks for nothing more, watering the inner garden as a saint in Avila does for her lord's dalliance, trying home decor after once reading Bachelard and agreeing with Nietzsche, who's like us and broken clocks, right according to the choreography of the sun. Only a God who dances makes any sense around here. Better to be a dog, calmly tagging behind he who is fearless, having taken shelter at his lotus feet, to arrive where Rupa, who's singing Ra and Da, sweetly proves grammar like physics are meant to bend in the wake of divine mood swings. I pray to hold in my heart.
Wow. Indeed. You know, the one thing that I was looking forward to was hearing you read the poem,
Hmm.
because it was a mental exercise at some point where I was just trying to figure out, okay, italicized, almost diacritically applied symbols, and
Hmm.
such. And I was like, I want to hear what this sounds like. And thank you for that. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Now, after the whole giggly and squeaky approach to the poem and sinking myself into it, I found myself writing something about it. I was like, initially, from what I shared before, but this is second to that. I'm like, this is like an eternal staircase of gray matter folding into itself at solid inflection points of true reflection, feeding the flame, working of a thing through space in the shape of a key of some sort. It's like, and then anyway, it just went into a whole trip. Like, what is a locksmith anyway, and what is he smithing? Now, I made notes on this side I'd like to share, but there's some places where I highlighted some of my favorite parts of the poem. But before
Wow.
we get into that,
Uh-huh. That's
your
that's
poem.
amazing. Yeah.
So it's like your poem is a multi-layered introspective exploration of Krishna consciousness interwoven with personal realizations, linguistic creativity, and a bold embrace of the poetic form. Let's get into some of the questions I have about
Sure.
themes and technique. Um, how does the poem explore the interplay between freedom and self-restraint, particularly in the context of Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, so what it sounded to me was your reference to the second and third stanzas, and how awful the face of grotesque freedom I cannot handle, to be taken as seriously as I demanded. So it explores the interplay between freedom and self-restraint in a couple ways. It explores freedom because it recounts a lot of my life. This is a type of biography, so it recounts three particular stages in my life. It recounts the type of freedom of having our desires guide us. Whatever comes to mind, you do. And then it also has, so that would be a superficial expression of our desires, whatever the senses are interested in. And then towards the middle, and specifically towards the end, it documents what are internal desires. So there's a lot of, desiring to follow my teachers, verb, and dive as doves to chase the original noun, the original being. And at the very end, this aspiration for hearing what Krishna's flute is. So it explores freedom in that way, what is expressed and what isn't expressed, and it tries to separate those two types of freedoms on the poem. Um, and the self-restraint is interesting because the only time that there's two types of self-restraint. There's the self-restraint that comes in the beginning, which is hiding. So when I express myself or my senses without restraint in the material world, there's a restraint to separate my identity from it. So we'll get to that later. There's a desire for anonymity. I mean, we could get into that forever, how the recognition that I am different from my senses, it's like we really know it. And the more that the senses are allowed to do whatever they want, there's this natural desire to become separated from it, or to do it in secrecy, or to create some kind of divide. Whereas in the second part, where there is a attempt to grasp for a true internal freedom, there's not a desire for a separation. There's actually a desire for unity of all things. And sometimes it looks conjointed and messy and silly, like combining, Goofy's voice with the recognition of Prabhupada's presence in my life. But there is another kind of self-restraint, which is that those things do belong on the inside, and I am living in this external world. So, like I mentioned, Nitai and Nimai, but I do it in a grammatically veiled way. I don't actually mention them by name, but I hide them in the sounds. So that's where, like, I mean, we can talk about this a lot more later, but like Srila Prabhupada is the only acharya in our disciplic succession recently that has not revealed his Swarup. He speaks so much about how amazing Krishna is, but he behaves specifically as like a sadhaka rupa, a person who's like practicing to become. So I think that that's the other place of self-restraint, that like we guard like a very precious jewel within our hearts, our relationship with Krishna, and we interact with everyone as brothers and sisters in a pursuit of him.
So, which part of your life were you in, particularly in the first part of the poem? I'd say maybe the first, let's say, 4 couplets. But anyway, I found it really difficult as well to isolate each part of the poem, because it rolls into itself. Like I was saying, it's like almost like an eternal staircase of gray matter, and each time it's like reflecting these images that I was like, this is really dope. But particularly here, cornering something elemental in the room, I was just thinking about how you, and in removing yourself as that, looking at some of the questions and how I was phrasing them, in referring to you as you, and at some points as the poet, because sometimes it does work to remove yourself from the situation. Something I wrote about that as well. But I was just picturing you as this celestial who's like floating around this space. Could you just share like what was going on in your life? Where were you?
So this poem began to be written in November, December, 2 years ago. And it was about that whole year that happened before. So this was around 2022. And I was going through, I guess, an extended dark night of the soul. I can't have like I can't say that I have a singular dark night of the soul. I have like a protracted, often occurring dark night of the soul, but this was a particularly interesting time in Portland 2 years ago that was rife with transition and change in my life.
Yeah, actually, when you said that, it kind of reminds me of a conversation we had where you were talking about moving, shifting spaces.
Yeah.
Fuzziness. Yeah, but moving on to our next question, you mentioned starving the vestigial parts of this body. What do you think this means in terms of spiritual practice and self-discipline?
Yeah, so it's Krishna does not recommend practicing an austerity that causes harm to one's own being, that tortures one's own being, that's austerity in the mode of ignorance. So I guess this raises the question of what's vestigial. You know what I mean? Like, at the time, I was really identifying with this feeling of like, I just need to get out of this. Like, I need to get out of everything that I'm experiencing right now. Like, my mind is vestigial. Like, my mind is not cooperating with me, and or I'm not strong enough to resist the temptations of my mind. Or I can't suss out what is the voice of my mind and what is the voice of my intellect and what is, Krishna's
Mm,
guidance. And then everything connected with the mind, like the body, like this also feels like vestigial. So there's a type of, I just want to preface it by saying like there's a type of madness in like, Prabhupada said to be in the material world to some degree means to be haunted, to be mad. So there is a degree of madness that we all experience in being in the material world, and like where most of us find ourselves, where we can still interact with the material world and like complete some kind of karma, even if it's v-karma, but like still perform some activities. Um, we just don't call that mad. But when you don't perform your duties, when like everything that you're doing is like, like impious, then we kind of call that like a type of madness. I guess I
mm,
mentioned that because I was feeling very close to that.
mm,
So I guess I was starving vestigial parts of myself by, just to keep it related to what you said, I think it's part of spiritual life is that like there are itches that we have that don't always need to be scratched. And there's itches that we have that can be scratched in proper ways. Like sometimes it's very cooling to put a cool bag of rice on an itch instead of using a sharp fingernail to scratch something.
mm,
So there's proper ways to starve and feed. It just depends on what you focus on. Sometimes, like in that place, I feel like I was too far off the tracks to like, it's just it felt too difficult to like come back into a very slow plot process of regulation. I feel like I would have gotten out of hell better by going through it than trying to like walk away from it. I just kind of I at some point I just made the decision, like the gravity of it felt too tough. I was just like, let's just go into this. So I
mm,
actually didn't starve it in the beginning. I gave forward. I gave quarter to everything. But this poem actually helped me out of it. That this poem was actually, we can get into that later, but like writing this poem was the transition through that.
mm.
Does that
Um,
answer the question, or was that like too
it
ambiguous?
no, no, it isn't. It actually speaks to and affirms the desire and effort behind discussing Krishna conscious poetry with Krishna conscious poets or creatives and their creative works. Because one
Mm-hmm.
thing I was thinking around this and how to name it and what to name it, I was thinking Kavya Khona, Kavya, maybe like Kavi or
Mm-hmm.
Kavya, and then
Mm-hmm.
Kona as in the Zulu word Kona as in here, present, but also a play on corner, poetry corner kind of thing. But also on that, I was thinking the art of sharing realizations and what does that mean? I like how at the beginning you referenced our acharyas, so it was an idea around studying the works of the Vaishnava acharyas and going deep into also practicing this process of sharing realizations and going into or discovering ourselves back into our original consciousness. So you just
Mm-hmm.
basically just, you have to go through it in order to get through it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm. I think I'll skip our third question because you also already spoke around that, the
Yeah.
point of
Yeah.
anonymity. Into our observational question, how does the theme of transformation manifest in the juxtaposition of grotesque freedom with divine connection?
Yeah. This was I went out on a limb with that. Usually when we read devotional poetry, our acharyas they keep the material world at a distance. For example, Narottam Das Thakur, he'll say like, I've willingly drunk poison, but he doesn't talk about how that poison manifests. How much does it burn? Where did he buy it? How often does he take it? He's just like, it's such an irrelevant thing, like what that poison is, but he goes back to what he's missing because his focus really is Radha and Krishna. He doesn't talk about the poison a lot. So what is the poison? I have not worshipped Radha and Krishna. I've wasted this human life. And he leaves it up to the creativity of the reader, you and I, to fill in the blanks of what do we do with our wasted time? Because we don't need his help to explain how we waste time. What we could use as guidance in is what is the devotion? How does lamentation, how does greed, how does even madness express itself in a spiritual atmosphere? Because I lament, I'm mad, I'm greedy, but I want to see from him, how can I spiritualize those things? I won't say that it was purely intentional. It was like very cathartic for me to just like be honest. So for me, it was self-serving to be honest and to share. But I think, if I had to find a silver lining to it or see what would be a tangential good, would be that how can I say this? You and I are living in a context 50 years after Srila Prabhupada has, been present on Earth, and Srila Prabhupada's disciples are leaving the planet. And, we hear from Krishna book that whenever Krishna comes, he comes with his devotees. He's always accompanied with his devotees to perform some purpose. And we see from the life of Srila Prabhupada that there were very special souls that were present for his performance of activities on Earth. And it can, while we don't want to deify Srila Prabhupada and to put him in this place that is unreachable, because Srila Prabhupada wanted us to all be like him in some way. He wanted us to all take the mission of our spiritual master to our heart, dedicate our lives to serving Krishna, and 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 really giving our heart and blood and everything to do what has been done to us for others. So he wanted us to reach that platform. On the other hand, Prabhupada is he's a very special personality. And so are the people that were with him. Now, the nature of the world is to make mundane everything. I mean, everything is spiritual, but we treat everything as mundane. So there's a natural tendency that we have to just like see ourselves as equal on the wrong platform. Though Srila Prabhupada and his followers and us, we're all equal on the spiritual platform because we're equal to Krishna. On this material platform and how we behave and like what our adhikar is not. So sometimes we might, all that is to say that sometimes we might preemptively behave like the people that were with Srila Prabhupada, or do the opposite, which is to think that they are unattainable and to just stay at one level. Did you know? So we might say that, if I can, I'm 19, there were devotees back then that were 19 that were taking sannyas. I'm ready to like wear saffron for the rest of my life and be a sannyas and just dedicate my life to preaching. Or you can take the totally opposite approach, which is to say, what they did was undoable and unreplicatable, and I will never be like that, and let me just stay in my lane and not try to advance. So I guess one of the unintended consequences of this is that it shows that like it's possible. It shows something that I don't see a lot, which is that somebody admitting that they are full of flaws and full of reprehensible habits, but that their Srila Prabhupada was effective in inculcating in their hearts a desire for pure devotional service that makes life worth living.
You know, you're touching on, like I said, it seems we seem to be on the same mental plane, or elements of influence. I was just thinking about these words that keep popping up and themes around access and adhikar. I've been thinking about that quite a lot in trying to reach out to people, and also in trying to share and explore certain personalities' stories. And that's also been a very big part of the process of approaching these personalities. And now just going a step or a couple of steps back, where you're actually talking about, I like that point actually, and it clarifies thought and question that I had around how to approach the material world in your writing. Because it's been a recurring thing in conversations around creative expression, particularly creative writing, where I find myself getting trapped in or stuck in the loop of describing karmic complexity, you know.
Comic or karmic?
Comic too, because,
Yeah.
because I was just thinking, I was just saying to Chakranadi Mataji, she also wrote some really beautiful poetry. She shared this a couple of days back. I'll share some clips of her reading as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also taking this kind of present but also projected point of view of what the devotional situation is in the time of Srila Prabhupada. Particularly one poem that she shared, Tompkins Square Park, she took the perspective of the trees in conversation with the trees, and I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind, Anyway, I'll share that later. I hope you enjoy that. Yeah, so how Narottam Das Thakur keeps the material world at arm's length, even though in the world he's focusing on the point that he's not of the world.
Yeah.
Could you share how you managed to apply that? Because it's really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Honesty is the best policy, and self-acceptance.
So vulnerability, in a sense.
Yeah. Prabhupada changed my life when he said, if you write for Krishna. Because I always like to write. And so, I mean, that means something to a day one devotee. Write for Krishna, that means something, because everything that you're reading is written by a pure devotee. You're reading Bhagavatam, the Gita, Sri Upanishad, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instructions, like everything is being produced directly out of a pure being, Krishna, or it's passing through the heart of a pure being, Shukadev Goswami, Parikit Maharaj, Rupa Goswami, Prabhupada. So it's like what it means to write for Krishna, like the standard is super high. Maybe like a day 2 or 3, or like, a year 5 devotee is thinking, like they've probably now heard the thing where Prabhupada says, whatever I have said, you say it in your words. And that like brings it down a little bit. That brings it down to, okay, I have to talk about something pure, but I have to talk about it in my words. Great. And then there's like, I've been in Srila Prabhupada's movement for over a decade now, and like now I'm thinking a lot about time, place, and circumstance. Like I'm thinking a lot about Hridayananda Maharaj's desire to make Krishna consciousness as accessible to the Western world as possible and to the Western context. So now now I'm thinking like, while I try to explain something in Prabhupada's words, how can I also like um just really think about what is it that someone needs to hear? And like I was lucky. I'm just reading chapter Chitraketu meets the Supreme Personality of Godhead now in the sixth canto, and in one of those purports, Srila Prabhupada says that, Angira Muni didn't try to instruct Chitraketu before when he wanted to have a kid, but after his son died, then Narada Muni showed up. He was like, now you're ready for spiritual knowledge. And Prabhupada explains, until a person arrives at a certain dissatisfaction with the material world, they cannot be instructed. And he says, this is why the Krishna consciousness movement is flourishing in the Western countries, because they are they're actually on the platform of detachment. So so what I'm thinking is that Krishna consciousness is already getting the people that are like disappointed and disillusioned with the world. I think that the challenge is that how can we attract people that are like not so dissatisfied with it, because it's like, I have enough money, or I'm just making it by enough, or that like I'm being distracted enough from my dissatisfaction to still stay in the world. Like, what do you do about the lukewarm part of the world, like the part that isn't in hell? But like all of this is precarious. And so how do you it's in another sense, it's a way of like, we can look at it as like being compassionate to people that like haven't fallen into hell yet, like to be there, like to develop friendship with people that are like still in the world, like people that we would have called karmis before. Like um I think that they like, I mean, we like poetry, we like music, we like experiences that are real. And like, this is part of reality. Like, part of reality is that like, sa mahatma sudurlabha. It's very rare to find saintly people like Narottam. It's very common and easy to find people that are like in the middle and struggling to tashta. Like, I want to do something spiritual, valuable, and glorious with my life, but like, I'm not that. Um, but this is what it looks like to try every day. And I think that there's a lot of literature that could open up in that realm of like trying and like failing all the time, because how many of us might try a little more if we're really lucky? We're really lucky that like, despite our shortcomings, we keep going. And I think that that's due to our personal association with like our mentors, our gurus, and like how much we've read of Srila Prabhupada. How can we expect someone that doesn't have that kind of association with like a society of devotees, and who isn't even close to like surrendering, come into contact with it? That's going to require the people that are struggling to be more open about their story, so that like the tome of devotional literature becomes also about the glorious struggle and not about like the transcendental arrival.
There's so much to talk about, and I've been thinking like the creative process in Krishna consciousness is almost like an it could say a distillation process of, like I'm saying, all of this is going around. I mean, going on behind the scenes, and what the Krishna conscious reality is speaking towards in giving commentary to the reality of the situation we're in. I was just thinking if we could go back to the poem so that we don't float all the way out into the
Sure.
spiritual world, because we're leaving the stratosphere now.
Yeah.
We go back to the poem. There's some points of the poem here, or your poem as well,
Hmm.
that um, I highlighted. Where's that? Here we are. The thing is, the funny thing is, I was reading on this machine here, and
Hmm.
then I ended up making my notes and highlights on this side. I should have shared the document to this machine here.
Mm.
But I'll just read from how we bookmark quoting Borges 19 years ago may have started this surrounding consciousness with books seeking rest but awake all night transcribing the sun. I've been doing a lot of transcription work.
Yeah.
And for some reason that reached out to me. I guess because of that, I could relate. Where is that point here? There we are. Yeah, could you just share a bit about that, like what you want about here?
Yeah. When I was when I was 15 or 16, I went to a bookstore called Books and Books in Miami,
Mm,
and it had a bookmark and a quotation by Borges underneath it. He said, "I cannot sleep unless
mm,
I am surrounded by books." And your mind is so fertile and uninterrupted in a way when you're young. And I was like, that's something that I want in my life. And I remember like seeing it in Beauty and the Beast. I remember seeing it in my great grandfather's house. Like there were books. And I was like, that's the type of person I want to be. I want to be a person that's surrounded by books. And that, I mean, I can't tell you like how much that's done for me. Like when I see like an esoteric or a rare book, I'm like, yeah, it needs to be part of like my life. It like some people collect other things, but I just ended up kind of like collecting books, and every once in a while I actually read them, and the ones that I read have really made a difference.
mm. I was also just thinking about how you use, these, you could say, language rules or rules of language and such to kind of stress certain aspects
Uh-huh.
of what you're tapping into, like capitals, the names, for example, here, you know. Um, you said
Hmm.
pronounced Borges. I can't
Yeah.
say I've ever read anything by him.
Uh-huh.
Um, here as well, Nietzsche. I like how you do that. And then when you refer to either Srila Prabhupada or Krishna, then the capitals come into play. I really like how you're using language to play around like that. Could you tell us a bit about this joke here? Um, Flowering is
Yeah.
the only thing that happens. Yeah.
Flowering is the only thing that happens. Watch the so in Sanskrit, dhana means wealth. So Dhana means wealth. But hover away, the H over away, like the H goes, it just becomes dana. So
Mm-hmm.
wealth becomes charity when the and H is also an aspirant in Sanskrit. So you so when that aspiration leaves, the H leaves the word dhana, all you have is charity. So it helps me to serve the King of Charity, which is the name my spiritual master gave me.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
yeah, and the Goeth, that's how you spell Goethe. He's
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful poet. So that was just my way of adding this part of the poem is where I give thanks to all my teachers. So like I tried to in every line, or I tried to acknowledge like one of my teachers.
Yeah, also highlighted here, only a God who dances makes any sense around here. Better to be a dog calmly tagging behind he who is fearless, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. What's
Yeah.
going through your mind here?
So Nietzsche was, some people say that he was an atheist, but he also wrote once that I would only believe in a God that dances.
Mm,
So, in the same way that I think Aquinas baptized Aristotle or used his philosophy to support a lot of Christian points, we can, you know, introduce we can accept Nietzsche as a devotee if he says that only if a God danced, I would believe in him. And we know that God does dance, so we can say Nietzsche believes in God, or Nietzsche is, he has the seed of devotion in his heart.
mm,
Uh, yeah, and he who is fearless is another name for Abhay, or that's the translation for Abhay, he who is fearless. And
mm,
Abhay Charanaravinda is he who has taken shelter at his lotus feet. So You know, Srila Prabhupada is yeah, our master.
Mm. Um, second, well, another part that I highlighted where I found was particularly striking is
Mm.
here. If you don't mind reading that, I'm not sure if you can
Yeah.
see those. Yeah.
A single thank you is worth all the breath and time. Pushed from my open mouth as a voice to emerge freely into the hallway with lungs in place of wings. I'm wound into a dual compound, behaving like poems, attracted to the summer ground so much.
Mm. And then I couldn't stay away from here. I had to like highlight all of this going all the way through, because like I was saying, it just folds into itself. And one thing that usually pulls me in is like the imagery, the visuals that go with what the words may share. Do you ever have like that kind of experience when writing? Like, do you ever get thrown into this kaleidoscopic kind of mesh of imagery, and you have to like pull it back in, otherwise you get lost in it?
With this poem, absolutely. I mean, definitely in general, but like I've this is a poem that I've worked on more than anything, like more than any other piece of writing that I've done. This is like, yeah,
Mm,
I put a lot into this. So
mm,
this I had to um try to make a sutra of. It expanded so much, and it was like it became so connected to so many other things. I had to, this is where structure actually became really important, because
mm,
if it wasn't for like a vow to keep some kind of structure, it could have looked like anything, but structure it was is what reeled it in.
mm, mm. I was actually just thinking about that, which is why I kind of left it the way it was. I
Uh-huh.
wanted to like move it around so that we could just scroll through it easily. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, this is part of that's why I was like, it's like in the shape of a key of some sort, like, so
Yeah.
like, let me just leave it as it is. You had me even looking into your choice of font, and I was like, what is that font? Let me go research a bit about the font as well. Yeah.
Honestly,
Um,
now I understand your previous comment about a key and a locksmith. That is your creative expression. I see
mm,
that now. I see
mm,
that now just because I did this on two columns because I printed this out for the last chapbook that I wrote, but I can see that it
mm,
looks like a key now. So I think that that's definitely a projection of your creative interpretation. But
mm,
it's very nice. It's very
mm.
nice.
It's like so beautiful how you've been using, or how you used language and words and the symbols that go along with the symbols that make up the words, and I'm just thinking, like, here there's so much to go into, oh, this is some really beautiful work.
Um, I Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami opened my eyes to what poetry and language are capable of doing. Um, and I've just like licked the bottle of
Mm.
what they've done. Have you read Chitra Kavitwani?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'll send you an hour-long YouTube presentation where Matsya Prabhu, I believe, he goes into Chitra Kavitwani. It's a very small 11 or 12 poem composition, but Rupa Goswami does something. He has this one poem that goes like and I don't know if I'll get it right, but he says dhare dhara dhara dharam dhara dhara durarudim dhira dhira rara dhim rodham radha duram dharam. So Dhare means to hold, and dhara means one that holds what holds. So mountains are also called dharas. So dhara dharam means he who holds what holds, which is another name for Giridhari. So he goes on the whole poem just using two sounds, which is ra and dha, radha. So with the sounds that compose radha, he recreates the scene of Govardhan, describing Giridhari, describing the clouds and the mountain, and it's like, yeah, it just gives me goosebumps because then Jiva Goswami explains in his grammar book, actually all language is meant to glorify Krishna. And he explains the rules of grammar and even the parts of speech and the parts of sound as servants of Vishnu. And like for example, he calls consonants Vishnu dutas. And he says that, like, he calls the vowel sounds like a particular name, or like like Vishnu. So he says that, like, in all words have vowels in them, and you can't have a word without a vowel, but the consonants support it. So he's like explaining philosophy and theology by just communicating grammar. So with those two ideas, that like all sound glorifies Krishna, and that really blew my mind, that like that the rules of grammar are like the rules of the material world, that like in the same way that energy and shapes are being formed in the material world, in that similar way sound is happening. So how can I bring that knowledge into this poem? So like, I guess that goes to one of your questions about how can the concept of catching wind of what one is capable of inspire devotees to trust Krishna's plan. Like, I would say that a person can get so much realization by employing their natural proclivity to do something in Krishna's service. Like, it was my natural proclivity to write, but like engaging that in Krishna's service changed my life. Like writing this poem, like it gave me so many realizations about my own nature, and about the nature of honesty and vulnerability, which I later brought into service. And so, yeah, Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami, they're the real ones for helping and inspiring that like language could do this, for sure.
My bad, muted there. I
Oh,
was just
great.
thinking how you really have to really geek out, because that link I shared of Dravida Prabhu, who shared some poetry on the Wisdom of the Sages podcast. So that episode I shared with you, I think a couple of days ago or so,
Uh-huh.
and I just love his enthusiasm. you know, Beautiful, and I like how his translations or interpretations and sharings of the Acharya's works as well. I know my mind drew a blank. Mother Miller. I like how she also has work like that. It would be interesting to hear some of her writings and
Mm,
poetic works as well.
mm.
And thank you for taking us to that point about that poem, Ryan. I just hopped over that and I realized that I'd left that out. There's so much to talk about, and I'd hope to keep this under an hour, you know, but we're like 3 minutes away from the hour, and oh, Krishna, there's so much. There's
Yeah,
I was wondering, what is your favorite part of this poem, if there is?
my favorite part of this poem, if I had to pick, is this sentence that starts with "I fall" and ends with "my tongue." I mean, technically, the sentence
Mm.
begins with lungs, but if I had to say my favorite part, it would be the sentence that starts with "hooray" and ends with "in gentleness."
Where is that?
It's
Oh,
right
here.
beneath what you
See,
highlighted. Yeah, hooray
yeah.
on grass.
Uh, oh, yes. Which is why I ended up highlighting the whole thing. Do you mind reading this for us, the whole part in blue from there?
Yeah, yeah. I fall. Hooray! On grass. Full of hope, a hare hops best by bits, slanting my hips tortistically, rhyming with Krishna in a sentence. I feel his brightness the more how you say branch in Spanish rises to drown my tongue in gentleness. The taste of the world's sweetness sours to cotton candy I soak past, practicing openness to everything. Somewhat cautiously now on the page first, with ears poised counterparenthetically against a tree. I am the splash of hearing a game of telephone, or parrots drunk on mango juice, dripping syllables toward a symbol into completion, my fluidity buried. Sinking is still possible as the soul I am is simply naked skinny, dipping an ocean where my teacher's verb is doves and dive in jammets to serve deeper meaning, colored by freshness they've plumbed, swimming to the noun, cloistering itself. In a brilliant dream, I followed jubilantly, how adjectives mirror something swelling the vault of language.
Wow. I think that's my favorite line as well here.
That's several lines, but you
It's
like that
several,
last
right?
one. Yeah,
It's
that
like you can't, like that's what I was saying. You can't isolate parts of the poem. You just it ends up becoming your favorite poem altogether.
that's very kind. Well, if I could, I'd like to just explain why I'd like to geek out on why I like that one so much.
Mm-hmm.
I like it because the word for branch in Spanish is rama.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this way that like Krishna has hidden his name all over the world, and I'm sure, like for example, you said Kona. Kona,
Yes.
means something. What did you say it means?
Corner is like here,
Here.
now, and also means, corner, go koning in Tswana. Yeah, I like how he's hidden himself. That's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, so Kona Bhagyavanji, Guru Krishna Prasad. So like
Mm.
his language is everywhere.
Mm.
And so, like Prabhupada gave us that famous Haram, like, that's in
Mm.
Arabic. So that's one thing that I liked, and it was just nice to put Hare Krishna and Ram somewhere in a sentence. Like part of me hiding them was because like I don't want to give a bad name to Prabhupada's ISKCON, but then another part of me just like can't hide that like Hare Krishna and Ram are like, you know, my aspirations. So
Mm.
that's why I like that one.
Mm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, I know, I shared like 654 words worth of questions and hoping to go through everything in an hour, but yeah.
I think we
uh,
got through like 100, but it was fun.
it was, wasn't it? Oh, so before we started, I asked that you keep in mind somebody who you would like to hear read.
Yeah.
Who? Mm,
Um, I think that I thought about two devotees. I thought about Shardiya Ras,
oh yes.
and I thought of Ananda Murari.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah, I could help put you in contact with Ananda Murari if you don't already know him. But yeah, those are two devotees that I thought of. I thought of Shardiya Ras first because I believe it was by her grace that you and I got to meet.
yes, it was. And after
Yeah,
that, I asked her, are you a poet? And she was like, no.
yeah,
Yeah, and I was like, there's something there.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for
yeah.
coming and sharing your time with me and giving me your association. It's been very enlightening and geeking out on words and geeking out on process and poetry. It's something really beautiful to share. Yeah.
Likewise, I mean, again, I really appreciate the time that yeah, I appreciate your time and inviting me to think about this and to speak about it with you. It is very cathartic. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. And again, yeah, Vancha Kopa Rubius Cham, Vasan Baby Chap, Titanam Pavani, Vaishnav Behold.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Yeah.
Have a great one, Prabhu. Take care.
Same to you. Hare Krishna.